In the book of Genesis, we meet a young dreamer named Joseph, betrayed, forgotten, yet never abandoned. What began in a pit became a story of hope, purpose, and restoration. Follow us as Sacred Insights presents the story of Joseph the Dreamer. In the land of Canaan, around 1900 BC, there lived a man named Jacob, also called Israel, who had 12 sons. These 12 sons would become the fathers of the 12 tribes of Israel, shaping the destiny of a nation. But among these 12, there was one who was different, one who was favored, one who was given dreams from God that would change everything. His name was Joseph, the 11th son, born to Jacob's beloved wife Rachel, a 17-year-old shepherd with a gift that would make him both hated and exalted. This is a story from Genesis chapters 37 through 50, a story that spans over 2 decades, covering betrayal, slavery, false accusation, imprisonment, divine revelation, and ultimate redemption. It's a story about how God can use the worst intentions of men to accomplish the greatest purposes. And it begins with a coat and a dream. Genesis 37, verse 3. Now Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons, because he had been born to him in his old age. And he made an ornate robe for him. This wasn't just any robe. In ancient Hebrew culture, this coat of many colors was a symbol of favor, status, and inheritance. It signaled that Joseph, not Reuben, the firstborn, would receive the family blessing and leadership. Every time Joseph wore that coat, his brothers' jealousy deepened. Verse 4. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. But then Joseph had dreams. And these weren't ordinary dreams. They were prophetic visions from God. Joseph told his brothers, "Listen to this dream I had. We were binding sheaves of grain out in the field when suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright, while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it." His brothers' response? "Do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us?" And they hated him all the more. "Listen," he said, "I had another dream, and this time the sun and moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me." Even his father rebuked him. "What is this dream you had? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow down to the ground before you?" Genesis 37-11 tells us his brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. Jacob recognized something in these dreams. They weren't the fantasies of an arrogant teenager. They were revelations from God. But to Joseph's brothers, these dreams made him dangerous. Because sometimes God-given destiny exposes human insecurity. One day, Jacob sent Joseph to check on his brothers, who were grazing flocks near Shechem, about 50 miles from home. He wore that colorful coat as he walked across the desert. When his brothers saw him in the distance, they plotted murder. "Here comes that dreamer," they said mockingly. "Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams." They weren't just trying to kill a person. They were trying to kill a destiny. But Reuben, the oldest brother, convinced them not to shed blood directly. "Throw him into this cistern here in the wilderness, but don't lay a hand on him." Reuben secretly planned to rescue Joseph later and return him to their father. Instead, they stripped Joseph of his robe, threw him into an empty pit, and sat down to eat while their brother cried for help from the darkness below. Then they saw something, a caravan of Ishmaelite merchants heading to Egypt, their camels loaded with spices, balm, and myrrh. Judah, one of the brothers, had an idea. "What will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him. After all, he's our brother, our own flesh and blood." So they pulled Joseph out of the pit and sold him for 20 pieces of silver, the price of a slave. They took his beautiful coat, dipped it in goat's blood, and brought it to their father. "We found this. Examine it to see whether it is your son's robe." Jacob recognized it immediately and cried out, "It is my son's robe. Some ferocious animal has devoured him. Joseph has surely been torn to pieces." Then Jacob tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and mourned for his son many days. All his sons and daughters came to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. The same brothers who caused the pain now pretended to share it. He mourned for his son while Joseph in chains was being taken to Egypt, a foreign land where he knew no one and no one knew his God. Meanwhile, verse 36 tells us, the Midianites sold Joseph in Egypt to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard. Potiphar's house. In Egypt, Joseph was purchased by Potiphar, the captain of Pharaoh's guard. He was a slave in a foreign land, surrounded by people who worshipped Egyptian gods. Ra, Osiris, Isis. He was the foreigner, the Hebrew slave. Everything he knew, his family, his home, his identity was gone. But Genesis 39 verse 2 gives us one of the most important statements in the entire story. The Lord was with Joseph so that he prospered, and he lived in the house of his Egyptian master. Even as a slave, Joseph didn't become bitter. He didn't just survive, he excelled. He worked with integrity. He served with excellence. And everyone noticed. Verse 3, when his master saw that the Lord was with him and that the Lord gave him success in everything he did, Joseph found favor in his eyes and became his attendant. Potiphar noticed. Joseph wasn't like other slaves. There was something different about him, a wisdom, a diligence, a trustworthiness. So Potiphar promoted him. Eventually, Joseph became the manager of Potiphar's entire household. He went from slave to head of the household, the man who managed it all. Verse 6 tells us, Potiphar left everything he had in Joseph's care. With Joseph in charge, he did not concern himself with anything except the food he ate. Joseph was on the rise. After the pit, after the betrayal, it looked like things were finally turning around. God was blessing him. But then came another test, one even harder than the first. Potiphar's wife noticed Joseph too. The Bible says he was well-built and handsome. Day after day, she tried to seduce him. "Come to bed with me," she demanded. Joseph refused. His response reveals everything about his character. "With me in charge, my master does not concern himself with anything in the house. Everything he owns, he has entrusted to my care. No one is greater in this house than I am. My master has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God?" He said. Even in Egypt, surrounded by paganism, Joseph's loyalty was first to the God of his fathers. Day after day, she pursued him. Day after day, he refused. Then one day, when no one else was home, she grabbed his cloak and demanded he sleep with her. Joseph literally fled, leaving his cloak in her hands. Scorned and humiliated, Potiphar's wife lied. She claimed Joseph had tried to assault her, using his cloak as evidence. She called the household servants and said, "Look, this Hebrew has been brought to us to make sport of us. He came in here to sleep with me, but I screamed. When he heard me scream for help, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house." She kept the cloak as false evidence. When Potiphar came home, she told him the same lie. Verse 19, when his master heard the story his wife told him, saying, "This is how your slave treated me," he burned with anger. And Joseph, the innocent man, the faithful servant, the one who honored God above all, was thrown into prison. Betrayed once by his brothers, now betrayed again by false accusations. Punished for doing the right thing. It's injustice upon injustice, pain upon pain. But watch what happens next. The prison. Genesis chapter 39, verse 20. Joseph's master took him and put him in prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. This wasn't just any prison. This was the royal prison, where Pharaoh's enemies were held. Dangerous men, forgotten men, men who would likely never see freedom again. Joseph could have given up. He could have cursed God. He could have said, "I've tried to do the right thing, and look where it's gotten me. Slavery, false accusation, prison. What's the point?" But he didn't. Verse 21 says something beautiful. But while Joseph was there in the prison, the Lord was with him. He showed him kindness and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. Even in prison, God was with him. Even in darkness, Joseph maintained his character. Verse 22 to 23. So the warden put Joseph in charge of all those held in the prison, and he was made responsible for all that was done there. The warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care, because the Lord was with Joseph and gave him success in whatever he did. The warden put him in charge of all the prisoners, from slave to household manager, from prisoner to prison administrator. Wherever Joseph went, he rose to leadership, not because he demanded it, but because his character demanded recognition. Then something significant happened. Sometime later, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt offended their master, the king of Egypt. Pharaoh imprisoned his chief cupbearer and chief baker, both high-ranking officials who had access to the king. In that culture, these were crucial positions. The cupbearer tasted the king's wine to ensure it wasn't poisoned. The baker prepared his food. They were placed under Joseph's care in the prison. One night, both men had dreams they couldn't understand. When Joseph saw their distressed faces the next morning, he asked, "Why do you look so sad today?" They replied, "We both had dreams, but there is no one to interpret them." Joseph's response is crucial. Genesis chapter 40, verse 8. Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams. Even after everything he'd been through, Joseph still believed in the God who gives dreams. He still trusted that God reveals mysteries. The cupbearer's dream. In my dream, I saw a vine in front of me, and on the vine were 3 branches. As soon as it budded, it blossomed, and its clusters ripened into grapes. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes, squeezed them into Pharaoh's cup, and put the cup in his hand. Joseph said, "This is what it means. The 3 branches are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your position, and you will put Pharaoh's cup in his hand, just as you used to do when you were his cupbearer." The baker's dream. Encouraged by the positive interpretation, the baker shared his dream. I too had a dream. On my head were 3 baskets of bread. In the top basket were all kinds of baked goods for Pharaoh, but the birds were eating them out of the basket on my head. Joseph's interpretation was grim. This is what it means. The 3 baskets are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift off your head and impale your body on a pole, and the birds will eat away your flesh. 3 days later, it was Pharaoh's birthday. He held a feast for all his officials. He restored the cupbearer to his position. He executed the baker. Everything happened exactly as Joseph said. Before the cupbearer left, Joseph made a desperate plea. Genesis chapter 40, verse 14 to 15. But when all goes well with you, remember me and show me kindness. Mention me to Pharaoh and get me out of this prison. I was forcibly carried off from the land of the Hebrews, and even here I have done nothing to deserve being put in a dungeon. The cupbearer was restored to Pharaoh's side, just as Joseph predicted. But Genesis chapter 40, verse 23 breaks your heart. The chief cupbearer, however, did not remember Joseph. He forgot him. 2 more years. Joseph stayed in that prison for 2 more years, overlooked, forgotten by men, but not forgotten by God. The turning point. 2 years later, Pharaoh had 2 dreams that terrified him. He woke in the night, troubled, unable to shake the feeling that these dreams meant something urgent. In the morning, he summoned all the magicians and wise men of Egypt, the scholars, the priests, the interpreters of mysteries. He told them his dreams. None could interpret them. Pharaoh's first dream. I was standing on the bank of the Nile, when out of the river there came up 7 cows, fat and sleek, and they grazed among the reeds. After them, 7 other cows came up, scrawny and very ugly and lean. I had never seen such ugly cows in all the land of Egypt. The lean, ugly cows ate up the 7 fat cows that came up first. But even after they ate them, no one could tell that they had done so. They looked just as ugly as before. Pharaoh's second dream. In my dream I saw 7 heads of grain, full and good, growing on a single stalk. After them, 7 other heads sprouted, withered and thin and scorched by the east wind. The thin heads of grain swallowed up the 7 good heads. The magicians had no answers. The mystery remained. Then, suddenly, the cupbearer remembered. Genesis 41, verse 9. Then the chief cupbearer said to Pharaoh, "Today I am reminded of my shortcomings. Pharaoh was once angry with his servants, and he imprisoned me and the chief baker in the house of the captain of the guard. Each of us had a dream the same night, and each dream had a meaning of its own. Now, a young Hebrew was there with us, a servant of the captain of the guard. We told him our dreams, and he interpreted them for us, giving each man the interpretation of his dream. And things turned out exactly as he interpreted them to us. Pharaoh immediately sent for Joseph." Genesis 41, verse 14. So Pharaoh sent for Joseph, and he was quickly brought from the dungeon. When he had shaved and changed his clothes, he came before Pharaoh. Think about this moment. 13 years since that pit. 13 years of slavery, false accusation, imprisonment, and waiting. Now, in a single moment, Joseph stood before the most powerful man in the world. Pharaoh said to him, "I had a dream, and no one can interpret it. But I have heard it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it. I cannot do it, but God will." After everything Joseph had been through, he still gave God the glory. He still pointed away from himself to the one who reveals mysteries. Then Joseph listened as Pharaoh described both dreams, and God gave him the interpretation. Genesis 41, verse 25 to 32. The dreams of Pharaoh are one and the same. God has revealed to Pharaoh what he's about to do. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good heads of grain are 7 years. It is one and the same dream. The 7 lean, ugly cows that came up afterward are 7 years, and so are the 7 worthless heads of grain scorched by the east wind. They are 7 years of famine. It is just as I said to Pharaoh. God has shown Pharaoh what he is about to do. 7 years of great abundance are coming throughout the land of Egypt, but 7 years of famine will follow them. Then all the abundance in Egypt will be forgotten, and the famine will ravage the land. The abundance in the land will not be remembered, because the famine that follows it will be so severe. The reason the dream was given to Pharaoh in 2 forms is that the matter has been firmly decided by God, and God will do it soon. Then Joseph did something brilliant. He didn't just interpret the dream, he offered wisdom. Genesis 41, verse 33 to 36. And now, let Pharaoh look for a discerning and wise man, and put him in charge of the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh appoint commissioners over the land to take 1/5 of the harvest of Egypt during the 7 years of abundance. They should collect all the food of these good years that are coming and store up the grain under the authority of Pharaoh, to be kept in the cities for food. This food should be held in reserve for the country, to be used during the 7 years of famine that will come upon Egypt, so that the country may not be ruined by the famine. Pharaoh was stunned. Genesis 41, verse 38. Can we find anyone like this man, one in whom is the Spirit of God? Then Pharaoh turned to Joseph and said, "Since God has made all this known to you, there is no one so discerning and wise as you. You shall be in charge of my palace, and all my people are to submit to your orders. Only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you." Genesis 41, verse 42 to 43. Then Pharaoh took his signet ring from his finger and put it on Joseph's finger. He dressed him in robes of fine linen and put a gold chain around his neck. Joseph was given authority over all Egypt. He was given an Egyptian name, Zaphanath-Paneah, meaning God speaks and he lives. He was given a wife, Asenath, daughter of an Egyptian priest. The 7 years of abundance came, exactly as Joseph prophesied. He traveled throughout Egypt, collecting grain, storing it in massive quantities in every city. Genesis 41 verse 49. Joseph stored up huge quantities of grain, like the sand of the sea. It was so much that he stopped keeping records because it was beyond measure. During these years, Joseph had 2 sons. He named the first Manasseh, which means, God has made me forget all my trouble and all my father's household. He named the second Ephraim, meaning, God has made me fruitful in the land of my suffering. Even in his naming, Joseph acknowledged both his pain and God's redemption. Then the 7 years of abundance ended, and the famine began, severe and widespread. Genesis 41 verse 56 to 57. When the famine had spread over the whole country, Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold grain to the Egyptians, for the famine was severe throughout Egypt. And all the world came to Egypt to buy grain from Joseph, because the famine was severe everywhere. The famine reached Canaan, where Joseph's family still lived. Jacob heard there was grain in Egypt. Genesis 42 verse 1 to 2. When Jacob learned that there was grain in Egypt, he said to his sons, "Why do you just keep looking at each other? I have heard that there is grain in Egypt. Go down there and buy some for us, so that we may live and not die." So 10 of Joseph's brothers went to Egypt to buy grain. Jacob kept Benjamin, the youngest, Joseph's only full brother, at home, fearing harm might come to him. When they arrived in Egypt and appeared before the governor to buy grain, they had no idea they were standing before their brother. 22 years had passed. Joseph was now an Egyptian official, dressed in royal robes, speaking through an interpreter. They expected him to be dead or still a slave somewhere. But Joseph recognized them immediately. Genesis 42 verse 6. Now Joseph was the governor of the land, the person who sold grain to all its people. So when Joseph's brothers arrived, they bowed down to him with their faces to the ground. The dreams. Those dreams from Genesis 37 that made them want to kill him. Those dreams they mocked. Those dreams were coming true, right before Joseph's eyes. Testing and forgiveness. Joseph tested them. He spoke harshly. Joseph said to his brothers, "You have not come to buy food. You are spies. You came to learn where we are weak." But the brothers said to him, "No, sir. We come as your servants. We have come only to buy food. We are all brothers. We all have the same father. We are honest men." He wanted to see if they had changed, if they had learned compassion, if they would protect their youngest brother the way they failed to protect him. He kept Simeon as a prisoner and sent them home with grain, demanding they return with Benjamin. Joseph told the servants to fill the bags with grain. The brothers had given Joseph the money for the grain, but he didn't keep the money. He put the money in their bags of grain. Then he gave them what they would need for their trip back home. The people ate all the grain they had brought from Egypt. When that grain was gone, Jacob said to his sons, "Go to Egypt and buy some more grain for us to eat." Judah said to his father, "Let Benjamin go with me. I will take care of him. We have to go to Egypt to get food. If we don't go, we will all die, including our children. I will make sure he is safe. I will be responsible for him." When Joseph saw Benjamin with them, he said to his servant, "Bring these men into my house. Kill an animal and cook it. They will eat with me at noon today." The servant did as he was told. He brought the men into Joseph's house. Then the servant brought Simeon out of the prison. The servant led the men into Joseph's house. He gave them water, and they washed their feet. Then Joseph saw his brother Benjamin. Joseph said, "Is this your youngest brother that you told me about?" Then Joseph said to Benjamin, "God bless you, my son." Genesis 45 verse 1-3. Then Joseph could no longer control himself before all his attendants, and he cried out, "Have everyone leave my presence." He sent all his Egyptian attendants out of the room. So there was no one with Joseph when he made himself known to his brothers. Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Is my father still living?" But his brothers were not able to answer him because they were terrified at his presence. This was the brother they betrayed, the one they sold into slavery, now with absolute power to destroy them. But Joseph said something that transforms everything. Genesis 45 verse 5-8. "And now, do not be distressed and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. So then, it was not you who sent me here, but God." Joseph saw the bigger picture. He saw God's hand in every step: the pit, the slavery, the false accusation, the prison, the palace. All of it was preparing him to save nations. The family was reunited. Jacob, now 130 years old, came to Egypt and saw his son alive. Genesis 46 verse 29-30. Joseph had his chariot made ready and went to Goshen to meet his father Israel. As soon as Joseph appeared before him, he threw his arms around his father and wept for a long time. Israel said to Joseph, "Now I am ready to die, since I have seen for myself that you are still alive." Years later, after Jacob died and his brothers feared Joseph would finally take revenge, Joseph spoke words that have echoed through millennia. Genesis 50 verse 19-21. "Don't be afraid. I am not God. I have no right to punish you. It is true that you plan to do something bad to me, but really, God was planning good things. God's plan was to use me to save the lives of many people. And that is what happened. So don't be afraid. I will take care of you and your children." And so Joseph said kind things to his brothers, and this made them feel better. Joseph forgave. Not because they deserved it, not because the betrayal didn't hurt, but because he saw God's sovereignty over human sin. Joseph's family settled in Egypt, in the land of Goshen. He provided for them during the remaining years of famine. Genesis 50 verse 22. Joseph stayed in Egypt, along with all his father's family. He lived 110 years, from pit to palace, from rejection to reconciliation, from betrayal to redemption. The dreams didn't die in the pit. They were fulfilled in the palace. And through it all, God was sovereignly writing a story bigger than any one man's pain, a story of salvation for nations. Joseph's story, recorded in Genesis 37-50, teaches us timeless truths that transcend culture and century. First, your character in obscurity determines your capacity in visibility. Joseph could have become bitter in the pit, corrupt in Potiphar's house, or vengeful in the palace. Instead, he maintained integrity in every season. Whether slave, prisoner, or prime minister, he served with excellence. The question is never just will God elevate you, but will you be ready when he does? Second, divine purpose often looks like human rejection. Joseph's path to saving nations required the pit, required slavery, required prison. We want God to explain the we before we trust the how, but Joseph shows us. You don't need to understand the process to trust the one orchestrating it. Third, forgiveness releases you from the prison of bitterness. When Joseph forgave his brothers, he wasn't excusing what they did. He was refusing to let their sin define his future. Unforgiveness binds you to your betrayers. Forgiveness sets you free to fulfill your purpose. Fourth, God's delays are not God's denials. 13 years from pit to palace. 13 years of faithfulness without visible reward. But when Joseph finally stood before Pharaoh, he was exactly the right age, with exactly the right experience, at exactly the right moment. The delay was development. The waiting was preparation. Fifth, your dreams are bigger than you. Joseph's dreams weren't about his ego. They were about saving nations. God gave him a vision that seemed self-focused, but it was actually world-changing. When God plants a dream in your heart, it's not just about your elevation. It's about who you'll save, who you'll feed, who you'll restore when you get there. The ultimate truth. Genesis 50, verse 20. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. Your betrayals are not random. Your suffering is not meaningless. Your waiting is not wasted. God is sovereignly weaving every thread, even the darkest ones, into a tapestry of redemption you cannot yet see. Joseph the dreamer teaches us, hold fast to God-given dreams. Maintain integrity in every season. Trust divine timing even when it makes no sense, because the pit is not your end. It's your preparation. The prison is not your punishment. It's your positioning. The betrayal is not your defeat. It's your setup for a breakthrough that will save many lives. From Genesis chapter 37 to 50, from 17 to 110, from a pit in Canaan to a palace in Egypt. Joseph's story is not just ancient history. It's a mirror for every soul who has been betrayed, falsely accused, forgotten, or abandoned. It's a reminder that God wastes nothing, that divine purposes are greater than human plots, that redemption is always possible. The dreamer became a deliverer. The rejected became the redeemer. The slave became the savior. And his story whispers to us across the millennia, your dreams are not dead. They're being fulfilled in ways you cannot yet imagine. If this story found you in a season of waiting, betrayal, or hidden preparation, remember Joseph and that God is with you. And he is writing a story greater than your pain. And that is the story of Joseph the dreamer, a timeless lesson from the book of Genesis. May we carry its wisdom into our lives today. If this story inspired you, make sure to like, share, and follow Sacred Insights for more sacred stories that illumine the modern mind. Remember, each story is a spark. Let it light your journey.